Bruce Ohr and the author of the dossier, as you heard there, communicating on an encrypted app, and communications between the two continued long after the FBI had fired Steele. Just a couple of things we're learning tonight. So let's turn to former DOJ prosecutor Jim Trusty and former Deputy Assistant Attorney General John Yoo. Gentlemen, thank you both for being with us.
Sure.
All right, Jim, I want to start with you because you know some of these key players because of your work through the DOJ. What are your impressions about what we're learning tonight?
Well, there's still a whole bunch of questions. I guess that's the maddening part. We're getting closer to knowing more about the origins of this probe and really what conduct or perhaps misconduct was taking place. What I look at that's really interesting is that for 6 months, a decommissioned informant is being interviewed or being connected through Bruce Ohr to his original sponsors, the FBI. Like, I'd like to know, why are they having these meetings with Bruce Ohr? Why are they collecting thumb drives and other information from Bruce Ohr as he continues to work this relationship he had with Steele? So we're not all the way there for answers, but we certainly have some pretty good questions at this point.
And just to remind people, our viewers probably know this, but Nellie Ohr was Bruce Ohr's wife. He's the DOJ official. She was hired to do research for Fusion GPS. One of the things that I saw that caught my attention in the 302s tonight, these FBI notes on interviews with Bruce Ohr, one of them says, Glenn Simpson at Fusion GPS hired Ohr's wife, Nellie Ohr, to conduct research for his firm. Ohr voluntarily provided his wife's research to the FBI, but the Fusion GPS header was stripped. I mean, John, what do you make about this? What essentially seems to be a back channel, as we've talked about, once Steele was formally fired from the FBI, this information was still feeding there.
What you see here is an incredibly tangled web of conflicts of interest. It is incredible to me that Bruce Ohr is still in the job and hasn't recused himself when his wife, as you say, is working for the opposition research firm for Hillary Clinton and is transmitting information which he then deliberately conceals in terms of his origins. The second weird thing that's going on here, which I think gives a lot of fodder to people who think there's a deep state conspiracy, is that this is a fellow Bruce Ohr. He's a high-level manager in the Justice Department. He's not supposed to be conducting daily conversations with a potential spy or source. That's for the FBI. It's as if Attorney General Barr was handing off cash to Putin's secretary. It's ridiculous that you would have a high-ranking Justice Department official essentially trying to pretend he's a James Bond 007. When you see that kind of involvement, it makes you think something else is going on, that there are ulterior motives. And then the last thing I think it's worth pointing out here is that I think there's still more to come, as you were just saying, that there's still so many gaps of information that we still need to know, and that I think there's going to be further investigations. I think these people ought to be worried because, as you said, a lot of this information is being used to get surveillance warrants, and misrepresentations to the court is punishable as a crime.
Well, and in these 302s as well, Ohr talks about the fact that Steele was worried about congressional testimony that former FBI Director James Comey was going to give. Jim, I don't know if you were able to read through that section or what that signaled, if anything, for you.
Yeah, I mean, look, Steele is an operator in every sense of the word. I mean, remember, he got fired for leaking to the press his own self-serving stories. He was kind of vouching for the unvouchable. He was saying, this dossier is true, but by the way, I hate Trump. So there's a lot going on in his head that seems very politically oriented as opposed to being law enforcement oriented. And again, the fact that the FBI still wants to connect up with him after he's been fired for leaking is a huge problem. So where we're left is, we need to know who else was being told about Steele and about his shortcomings as a source of information, and why in that FISA application that John just mentioned, does it lowball the bias of that particular document. It may not destroy the probable cause in general, but they lowballed it, and they kept it in that lowball status of possibly politically oriented for several reapplications. So in other words, they could have corrected it at any point over a period of months, but they let it lie as if it was a fairly reliable document.
Okay, really quickly, John, Catherine Herridge, bless her, she is on vacation. She's off, but she's been looking through these things. And some email from her tonight, she says, one of the things that caught her attention, too, is why the FBI only began debriefing Ohr after the election when they knew he'd been providing information all along up until then.
Well, it's really weird. First, they're talking to him after the election. Second thing is, he's still talking to Steele until Mueller's appointed. That is extremely inappropriate. And again, it makes you think that these conflicts of interest aren't just innocent mistakes, but they look like more coordinated activity to try to gather more anti-Trump information and break the normal rules.
Well, we know more is coming. Someone told me tonight they think that the Inspector General Horowitz's report will likely be in by September, just weeks away. So Jim and John will have many more conversations with you about this as we learn more. Thank you both.
All right. See you, Shannon.
Thanks.